I just want to start out because, in things like that, it's things like this, you say, okay, what did I really remember from that 45 minutes of my life? If you don't remember anything else, remember this. Thank you. If you're a member of the government, if you're one of our industry providers, if you're in academia showing us the path ahead, and especially if you're in one of those smaller companies that's trying to break into this, which is traditionally a very frustrating process, thank you. Thank you for participating, and thank you for being part of something that's not only important for national security, but for the intellectual strength of our country. So my name is Sean Roche. I'm the deputy in that digital directorate. Carmen already said too many things, but I'm joined by two phenomenal panelists. Kevin Surace, who has a history of doing and implementing very disruptive technologies successfully, things people thought couldn't be done or things that really changed the balance in existing industries. And Chris Edwards, who runs a company called Third Floor that is integrated into Hollywood, teaching them a different way to make movies. And just two of his credits are Avengers and Game of Thrones. And I checked before I came here, trending number 1 and 2 on Google search for entertainment. So we're going to talk a little bit about AI and ML and what it means for us as intelligence officers and storytellers, and get perspectives from people who are making that change happen on the outside. Now, on the positive side, the great thing that's happened is tons and tons of data, multiplying by factors every year, especially in the open source arena, which is one of my responsibilities at the agency. And something else, the cloud, after 5 years of investment, GovCloud and C2S are delivering in a way we never thought possible. And quite frankly, the visionaries who thought that up 5 years ago were absolutely right. It was the right investment to make, and there's no turning back, and the only way to go from here is to go forward. So that's on the good side. For us, AI/ML is real. It's in the workflow today, and it's already making a difference, and that is starting to pick up some serious momentum. Now, on the challenge side, two really big challenges. First is that there are a whole lot of other folks that, with the tools and with information that's more freely available, would be competition for that storytelling. And the other thing that is most pressing is that although we have more data and more capability, the amount of time that we have as storytellers to get that story together and tell it has been dramatically compressed and will keep being compressed. So when I think about AI/ML, there's becoming too much of a buzzword. There's three things it really needs to deliver for us as the storytellers in the intelligence community. First, you all know about the morning and afternoon event. And of course, what I'm talking about is getting tasking from the upper decks. In the afternoon, it comes in about 4:30 in the afternoon. And it's a tasking that's probably due by 6 a.m. if you're lucky, or even later that evening. And that's when a lot of you make that very painful call home to talk about how you're going to miss a soccer game, you're going to miss dinner. And I think that's part of our tradecraft, is we learn to lie to our spouses and the people who care about us about when we're really leaving. And the fact of the matter is, it's just too much busy work at that point to try and respond as an analyst or as a data scientist. And if there's anything else you remember other than thank you, it's that AI/ML has to give you your life back. It has to do work for us. It can't be the tedium it is today. The second thing is, if you think about what the investments have to give us for, it's more time. If time is the enemy, then it has to buy back more time. Time for you to apply the tradecraft. Moving data between systems, parsing data, formatting data, getting data between regimes, getting data from other organizations, and the drug deals that we have to make to do that is not tradecraft. It's a necessary evil. Your tradecraft will always be valued, and AI/ML will make it more valued. So we can't have the storytelling cycle be paced by the speed of the color copier. And too often it is. Buy back more time. Third part, a very esteemed colleague of mine who operates at the highest levels explained that as a storyteller, it's no longer good enough to come in and say what we know or what we have been knowing. Instead, we have to inform people who want to do and will be doing. And so as a storyteller, we have to be able to have enough background to run simulations and have very agile adaptations of that story as it gets played out in the real world. And again, if we don't do it, there are other people who believe that they're well equipped to do that. So that's what storytelling has become, and that's what AI/ML must do for us. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our panelists to give some of their experience in implementing this big change, which is always difficult, and what that agile storytelling really has to look like as we go into the future. So, Kevin?
Oh my, so thank you, that's a lot of intro. Well, welcome to San Antonio, everybody. I've been out working with companies really implementing AI and ML for over 20 years. And all of this time, and especially over the last 5 or 6 years, people have become more concerned and more scared, like, oh, it's going to take over my job, it's going to do what I'm doing, it's going to, well, I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and they're simple, because we're going to boil it down really simply. Let's say you were the janitor of this facility, and this facility started out with literally just this room. It's the only thing they had built. You'd go, okay, every night I've got to go through and I've got to clean the floor in this room. I can probably tackle it. But now let's say they added the room out there, and then they added the room here, and they kept adding until they built the entire building, but they never gave you any more janitors. It's still just you cleaning the floor every day. Well, here's the choices you have. Either you can't get all the floors clean, which is a failure of your job, or you can never go home, you're working 24/7, you all feel that way, or the critical thinking janitor just Googles, you know, floor cleaning robot, finds some, and becomes the overlord of the robots. And now starts to make decisions on where do they clean, when do they clean, where do I recharge them, which ones do I build, who do I get to repair them, et cetera, et cetera. So it changes that janitor's purview of their job. And in fact, now they can clean the entire building. So I know this is a very simple example, but it's exactly like the kind of data influx that we have today. We are getting inundated with 2 or 3 or 4 times more data every year with essentially the same staff. We were talking backstage, you can't add more staff, there's no more parking spots. I mean, literally true, right? So even if you could get budget for more staff, you get a little bit. So when you walk that floor out there and you see all this ML and AI at almost every booth, there is nothing to be scared of. It's something to embrace. And the thing is, if you don't embrace it, someone's going to come along and embrace it. That's actually how you lose your job to ML. You don't lose it to ML, you lose it to someone else who's leveraging ML to do the job, number one. Number two, if you don't do it, your enemies certainly are. Our enemies certainly are. There is no question. Like, they're not even making bones about that. They're being very clear. We're going to be the leaders in AI, right? So we want to be the leaders. It is the most exciting thing. The math that we've developed and ability to leverage that into a cloud situation is unlike anything we've ever seen in our careers. So I am just incredibly excited about the opportunity.
Well, you know, what I'd love to do is to show you a little bit about what we do, because this panel was pitched to me as sort of a battle of the bands between visualization and how computers are being helpful to human workforces between the entertainment world and, of course, the real world. So without further ado, I'd love to show you a few visual examples of what we do, and then it might make a little bit more sense. So my name is Chris Edwards, and I'm the CEO and founder of a company called The Third Floor. So if they can put my, there we go. So The Third Floor is the world's largest visualization studio focusing on entertainment. So we have the pleasure of working on many, many projects every year, about 120 projects every year. That includes over 75% of the big Hollywood blockbuster movies, many other types of media. But to understand my journey and where I'm coming from, I think it makes sense to talk a little bit about my childhood. And today it's a lot of in my life is coming together, because not only is my dad a rocket scientist, having worked for Intelsat and launched satellites into space for over 30 years. But my grandfather was an officer in the Air Force, and so it means a lot to me today to understand more about what you guys are doing here. But my life wouldn't be possible without my beloved mother, who also was a costume designer on both The West Wing and on 90210, and I still don't know how they met each other in college. It's still a bit of a mystery. But so it's between this love of technology that my dad taught me and this love of art and creative ways to use construction sets and, of course, cinema, that I was conflicted. I wanted to find a career where I didn't go into just art or just technology. I wanted to embrace them together. And in the middle of that was the answer. Of course, go work with George Lucas, make Star Wars in the future. As improbable as that actually seemed at the time, because I went to RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and 5 years of hard work at Disney Feature Animation, I actually got that opportunity to work not just for one of George's companies, but directly with George Lucas on the 3rd floor of Skywalker Ranch House. This is where we designed Star Wars Episode 3 and War of the Worlds with that other guy named Steven Spielberg, who is also hovering over my shoulder. So this is what we did, and this is about 17 years ago. We developed a process to do visualization in advance of the final results in the film. So you can see in these comparisons, when you dissolve between the pre-visualization and the final results, they're very similar. 90% of the simulation that we did came to pass in the final results. So this is a very empowering tool, even at this time, before it was really even understood by the rest of the industry. And all of this was driven just by a small spark of an idea. You know, Steven Spielberg did these drawings over here. And even though, you know, these are very childlike drawings, the ideas behind them are very intense and important, and we needed to translate that data into something that resembled a feature film sequence. Even napkins were used, the filmmaker's preferred medium. And this is a long history going back to the early days of Hollywood and in Europe, is the process of creating storyboards as the blueprint. Even in Alfred Hitchcock's movie, these are from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. These are the original storyboards behind that famous scary sequence, the shower scene in Psycho. And so what I wanted to do from an early age was to find a way to empower filmmakers to do more than they could ever imagine. And so I wanted to create a tool set for all creators, even films that were not possible at the time. Films that are so virtual and so layered that you need to plan every aspect. So let's take a look at one of the sequences in the Avengers Infinity Wars, and you'll see our work on the left done far before any actors are shot.
For a drop of blood.
So you can see how powerful this tool could be for the decision makers on our projects. And what we do is we try to build new technologies that kind of delight our key customers before they even ask for that capability. So from the tech that we were involved in on Avatar to working with this amazing visual effects studio called Framestore on Gravity, and then working all of that technology into shows like Beauty and the Beast. We're constantly trying to innovate with our process, but it always begins with the traditional craft of storyboarding. And we then start building the world with all of these digital assets that we've built painstakingly over the years. We have a proprietary library that allows us to pull all of these assets together, including the actual equipment that our warriors use in the field, cameras, dolly grips, even robotic camera cranes like the ones used on Gravity. And then once you build the world, you need to explore that world. So all the data is accessible in real time using the Unreal Engine and going there from there into building out the action, basically doing a simulation of what this scene might look like and trying out different scenarios at different angles of the camera. But it's not good enough just to build something virtually. You need to work on presenting the data out in the field. So this is where we use our own AR or augmented reality applications to present the data overlaid with the real world so that things can come together on set. And then this is just the beginning of your road to winning an Oscar for visual effects. So the thing is that we're not just feeding off of the information from all of these decision makers. We're actually empowering them to be better decision makers by feeding back the collective vision. So everyone from the director to the stunt choreographer, the editors, and certainly the cinematographer, even the drone operators can feed off of this collective data resource. And they all need to see different things. So like in Game of Thrones, we depict the technical data that's derived from our creative decisions in both formats that you can print out and also in animated format and different digital data that actually drives the simulation that allows people to ride the dragon, for instance. All of this stuff is worked out in advance. And you can see the results here, even though we spend less time per episode than in a feature film, we still get the results that are desired. And in the interest of time, I will move on and show you this other scene. This is at the end of season 7. I'm sorry for those spoilers if you haven't caught up yet. But so this is where we got to integrate VR technology for the first time into Game of Thrones. And just like back with Uncle George, we started with just a simple sketch. And then that was the conceit for this big conflict with the White Walkers, where they're surrounded in an icy lake. And so just like I imagine many of you professionals, we start with maps. We try to figure out the logistics of where we're going to go. So we realize that there is this quarry nearby, and you can spray all kinds of fake snow out there. It looks pretty good. But then we made the mistake of showing the directors these shots that were taken, beautiful photography from Iceland. So they said, oh, I want that too. So we figured out a way to actually drive a drone and have it take plate photography from different key locations that had been scouted in the previs, and then we overlaid that together. So not only could we predict what it would be like on the day, but also what it might look like if you were to combine that with the Iceland background. So this is how we figured out exactly how to stage these complex scenes, and that's not even including figuring out the dragon and the flamethrowers on robotic systems, and all of this stuff was figured out by our team. So here, check out this short video that explains more of how that real-time system works.
The Third Floor is a frequent contributor in the visualization and virtual production of today's most epic film and television projects. The ability to execute rapid iteration of creative ideas within real-world parameters is the Third Floor's expertise. Demonstrated in this past season's scene from HBO's Game of Thrones is a real-time interactive visualization workflow. Capabilities include new ways to scout sets, plan practical shooting, and frame the action virtually. Advancements from the Unreal Engine are at the hub of many possible future media creation and consumption pathways, and are only a beginning in a sea of possibilities for the way content can be visualized, developed, and viewed.
And that entire scene and the scene before it, in fact, the whole season was done by these 6 people, led by a female supervisor, Michelle Block, one of our rock stars. And they all got a picture on the Iron Throne. And lastly, I just wanted to show you this, which is the newest trend is bringing all of this data live on set with not expensive hardware, but just on an Apple iPad. So here we are aligning a digital asset to a real location. We can click a few buttons do a holdout mat, and see it then superimposed and matching the real location. After a few more adjustments, we can walk around and validate what any angle looks like. So if we're predicting where the dragon's going to come in before it maybe lands into the arena, this is super valuable to have that on the day. And I can only imagine the military and government applications of this in the future for buildings. And so I just want to remind you all that you don't really need a Death Star or a Dragon in your project to use visualization at this level. You know, of course, it works with theme park attractions. We designed most of Universal's e-ticket attractions, and we're very blessed to have worked on so many different video games. And actually, if you combine theme parks and video games together, you get VR, which is a great simulation tool. And we were so honored to work with Fox and our partners on The Martian to create this basically a real-time simulation. So you felt like you were Matt Damon and got to do the mission highlights in this VR experience and even drive the rover around Mars. And so I find that when I every day go into work, I see shots like this. It's a bunch of people sitting at computers. It's what James Cameron affectionately refers to as the brain bar as he shoots his movies. And these computers are just empowering our human decision-making process. So does that look familiar? You know, just one quick look at the NGA website showed me everything I apparently need to know about geospatial intelligence. And it really resonated with me that, you know, we're all trying to acquire and interpret a diverse range of data. We're integrating the data into simulations that can optimize the results. And then we're presenting that in an easy to digest fashion so that many different groups can feed off of that information and get exactly what they need so that it empowers them when they're out in the field. But in our world, these are our generals that are calling the shots. They just look a little different. But they're just as tough, I think, as you prove me otherwise. But they're really, really tough. And the other thing that's wonderful is that we always get to change and manufacture the Hollywood ending. So, well, thank you so much for your time. It's wonderful to give you this brief introduction. Thank you.
So that's you know, really powerful stuff. I'd just kind of like to have a desktop that has speakers. But Kevin, I want to turn over to you and kind of really have a candid conversation about, okay, we see the power and we see the sense of urgency in doing this. You've had a history of going in and implementing disruptive technologies, and that's really seems to be extremely difficult in our environment. What are some of your thoughts there?
Yeah, look, all disruption, when you bring it to an organization, is a culture thing, as we know. And it's about changing the culture of the organization to accept change and accept risk. And we're taught to avoid risk. Just as humans we're taught to avoid risk. Culturally, avoid risk, hang in there, I'll get to retirement. Don't break it, that's it, right? So the problem is that if you want to advance, you need to take some risk. And it's one of the big core principles of Silicon Valley. So in Silicon Valley, we talk about walking through walls. We literally say, literally, I should be able to stand up. I think one of these is a concrete wall around here. Some of them are fake, but find the concrete wall. And if I took any of you and said, you've got 30 minutes, figure out how to walk through that wall, most of you are going to say, well, that's impossible. It's concrete. I can't walk through a concrete wall. But the truth is, of course you can, because in 30 minutes, I think you could grab an Uber or a taxi, run to Home Depot, get a chainsaw, and chainsaw your way through the wall. And of course you can walk through the wall. I didn't give you any bounds to walk through the wall. So it's all about the critical thinking of what it is I've been asked to do. And if you're asked to move all this stuff to the cloud, as you alluded to up front, at first you could go, oh, there's all this risk. Absolutely, and you should evaluate all of that. It doesn't keep you from doing it. In fact, it's part of the excitement of doing it. Part of the excitement of doing something new and being disruptive, whether it's ML, AI, or cloud, or whatever, quantum computing now, is to get a group together and come up with not the reasons not to do it, but all the challenges. In fact, challenge yourself to come up with the longest list of challenges you can. Because that's actually now exciting. It gives you all something to work on, something to chew on, something to change. I've been in and out of AI and ML for 20-something years, but in fact invented the first virtual assistant. Her name was Siri. Actually, it was Mary, was the person whose voice we recorded, long before there was Alexa and Siri and all that. And it was called Portico, actually. But it eventually became Siri. So before all of that, and in between that, actually, I worked in the construction field and did some unique technologies for construction. And I got to retrofit the Empire State Building. And we did some 70,000 projects, but we retrofitted it for energy efficiency. And we invented some new windows, and everybody told us in the industry, you can't retrofit a building like that. You won't save energy, it's impossible. And then we said on top of it, we want to reuse the old glass. And they said, well, that's crazy. So we literally built a factory on the 5th floor, sawed our equipment in half to get it up the elevators, welded it back together, built a factory on the 5th floor, took out 6,556 windows, about 26,000 panes of glass, cleaned the glass, built new windows out of the glass, with a separate chamber in the middle and 2 different kinds of gas on both sides. Put them back up. We went from an R2 to an R8, improving the resistance to heat flow by 400%. Saved them all of the cost of the windows in under 3 years. And the industry said, can't be done, which made me go, now it's fun, right? What fun is it if people say it can be done? Well, let someone else do that. So I highly encourage you to go do the things that people say are going to be hard, they're going to be risky, and they're going to be scary, and just go do that. That's the fun. Why would you not want to do that? Why do you want to get up every day and do the same thing anyway? I don't know if that's helpful, but there's my 2 cents.
And from my experience, we've been 15 years in Hollywood, we've been the disruptors, or one of the disruptors, and so there's, I think, probably just as much history in Hollywood as what we can remember in government, and there's a lot of pride in everyone's individual crafts and a lot of systems and unions involved, and so what we decided to do, instead of going with the more combative approach of saying no, ours is better, you just adopt it without any inquiry, then we decided that we wanted to go and truly understand what the traditional craftspeople were trying to do, genuinely care, and then onboard them slowly in different bespoke ways to see, so that they truly believe that there is something wonderful that they could embrace, they could bring that into their process and make them better. And I think that we're just about there in Hollywood. So
I think those are so great points, because we talk about technology a lot, but really in this community, we have to think of it as tradecraft. There is the technology, but the technology is a path to the tradecraft. And the tradecraft, whether it's curation of data, collection of data, visualization, et cetera, those are innate tradecrafts, and they have to be respected. And probably the path that we should never go down is anything that demonstrates a disrespect for the nature of the tradecraft. Advancing the tradecraft and bringing it further, doing it the right way, I think that will always be embraced.
I'm going to give you a quick example to that. Many people, when they embrace AI and ML, they go, first, it's going to eliminate what I've been doing. I've been looking at this stuff and analyzing it, and it's not going to. And here's the reason why. One of the things they think is, now it's going to take all this data and get it down, and here's the answer. And now in working with companies for the last decade or so rolling out ML strategies, it's the opposite. ML, AI, machine learning, is actually going to find more things for you to make decisions on, not less. And I know everybody thinks it's less. It is not less. It will find 500 things that will be called to your attention. And now out of the 500 or 15 or 50 or whatever it is, your teams now have to step back and say, what's going to be in that story tonight or tomorrow morning? What is the most important to be in the story? Rather than, what was I possibly able to gather in time for the story? I've gathered too much. And they're all important. So you're raising the level of what the people are doing and really tapping the intelligence of everyone in this room to actually act on more data, not less, because it will find more things that you never thought were there. I mean, it'll find tracks that you could have, human eyes couldn't find. So it's fascinating. So it's actually more to do, right? To develop that story for the president or whoever it's for each morning, each night.
So just taking a little bit of a different twist on it, AI, ML are officially now Beltway buzzwords. And along with that, there's usually, we need to develop the opportunity to figure out where the priority investment should be. So let me ask you, how do you spot snake oil?
It's all snake oil at first. This is what you really have. All small, by the way, small companies are doing some of the most innovative work in the field. There's no question. And at first, it's kind of all snake oil. I don't mean that in a bad way. Everybody means to do well, but they've never applied it against your data. And your data is going to have its own issues. Of course, all data has issues. That is some of the biggest problem. But they've never applied it to your data, so they're convinced that it's going to work with your data. And what you've got to do is you've got to develop test or cleared databases that someone can go work on in a POC. And what I like to say in the AI and ML world, no POCs are actually free. I know some people are out there, oh, well, we'll do this for free. If it's free, trust me, it's worth what you paid for it, right? And you just need to do real POCs, real proof of concepts, with data that you trust, with probably 3 or 4 or 5 different vendors, and make it a bake-off. And you have very succinct guidelines of what the success criteria are. And I will tell you, whether it's government agencies, and I've worked with government agencies, or whether it's commercial, those who have patience, meaning months or a year or more, are going to find a vendor that has a solution with a set of patterns or a set of technology or a set of ML algorithms that happen to work for this. There are well over 100 well-known, in fact, hundreds of well-known ML algorithms, right? It's all how you apply them and who decides to apply them to your problem. So you've got to just run high-quality POCs. This goes for everybody here. And do 2 or 3 or 4 in parallel, and you're going to be fine. And they're not that expensive. In fact, it's terribly expensive to not do them, because when you're not doing them, either another agency is or one of our enemies is. And you don't want that. So you have to participate.
So one thing, when I look at all this visualization you're doing and how impressive it is and how realistic it's getting, let me ask you, where do you see deep fakes going? And when we think about deep fakes and what that could mean for understanding malign influence and the ability to manipulate, where do you see deep fakes?
Well, you know, I apologize if I'm one of the drivers of deep fakes and indirectly, because I think, you know, we're all contributing to technologies that that make it slightly easier to make more realistic graphics and to make changes beyond what you can do in Photoshop, because there's something about a moving image, like, you know, a piece of video footage that is also altered in some way, that because we're trained to say, oh, that's video, it must be like completely real. But, you know, visual effects people have been doing those types of fakes, the movie magic, for a long time, and those people are, you know, they're in the hundreds of thousands of skilled workers now. So you know, I think what you're going to need to do is to rely on some of the AI technologies, because to the human eye, it may not be perceptible. I think there's going to be little anomalies, differences in the way lighting impacts objects and whatnot, and with the compositing of images, that will be very hard to catch, except for in a, you know, just a fraction of a change, you know, a percentage change that is perhaps imperceivable. So, you know, I'm hoping that's where the AI world comes back to help, you know, point out at least the potential of a fake image or video that would then curtail some of that subterfuge.
So it seems for a lot of these issues that it's always a opportunity and threat, a cycle. Kevin, would you agree?
It's back and forth. In cybersecurity, we've seen this. You know, we had no AI in cybersecurity till 4, 5, 6 years ago, and then all of a sudden AI became the big way to do cybersecurity, because it can see that the admin shouldn't be on at 3 a.m. That's just, what are they doing on at 3 a.m.? Doesn't make any sense. So AI would pick that up just like that. That's a simple example, of course, but any of those anomalies. But as soon as you install that, then the bad guys get their own AI that figures out how to thwart that. And it's always this race of back and forth, but it's always been a race of back and forth. It's like, you know, we had keys to enter your home, and then you had people who could make keys to enter your home. And then you had keyless entry, and then you got people who can crack the keyless entry. And we go back and forth every year, and this is going to be the same, certainly with deep fakes. Deep fakes are already really, really well done ones are getting to the point of you need AI to look at it pixel by pixel. Actually, humans can still look at those pixels, and real humans
And it's so important to identify those fakes super early, because as we know with social media and the way in which news travels, if someone put out an inflammatory video and then gets the populace really riled up about that, it could like incite a revolt of some sort, even though that was just some guy's science project.
I mean, the funny thing was, guy's science project, in 1 minute you can make the Nancy Pelosi video of a week or two ago. All you did was slow her down and leave the voice at the same tone, and she appeared drunk. She was not drunk. It was just a slowed down video. It was the cheapest, easiest stunt that any of us could do in Final Cut Pro in 5 minutes, and yet half the world was, oh my God, she's drunk.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. So it shows you how powerful, you're right, how powerful video is, because we assume that the audio we hear from people, like if I hear you talking, oh, it's his voice. And the video that we see, these must be real, because throughout our life, they were real. Pictures we know can be photoshopped, right? People have been photoshopping pictures for 20 years. But we think these other two things are sacrosanct. Turns out they're no longer sacrosanct. In fact, nothing is. And so we're going to need some additional help in AI to decipher that.
Kevin, let me ask you, when we look at some of the big players in, and I'll call it the base technologies, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, IBM, those really are the
big ones.
Yeah. How do you feel they're getting some sort of monopoly that's going to hinder AI ML, or?
No, you know, I mean, people talk about, first of all, you know, AI taking over the world and things like that. Forget it. You should know that all of the big guys, first of all, and most of the small guys use the same ML algorithms, you know, have the same access to deep neural networks now. You know, the work that Google has done has been amazing, but much of this work is essentially open sourced. So anyone in the world can use it. Anyone in the world can get onto the Google Cloud or Amazon now and develop a neural net with a simple API. And anyone, like maybe with hours of training, can do this. Well, that's fascinating. Of course, the downside is large neural nets, deep neural nets, aren't actually usable for very many things unless you have a tremendously huge database and it's extremely clean data. So Facebook facial recognition, obvious place to use this, right? But then you start to, you know, get down to, then there's translation and things like that. But after that, there's not that many databases that are that large, that are that clean, which is why we don't see it being used everywhere. It's really hard to find clean data that's in the millions, right? But all of those providers are excellent. It all gets down to what you want to do and how much they want to charge. You wouldn't go wrong with anyone. And you see all of them are here in the Expo Center.
So the next question is really for both of you, and I think from the crowd, it's an excellent question, which is, when we talk about tradecraft, the other word we normally use with tradecraft is discipline, and along with the discipline, there's some standards. So in your fast-changing world of all the different technical standards of making those products, and the standards for working in the energy world with compliance and EPA and everything else, you've got a briefer up that potentially is up at the White House, briefing a product that has been empowered by AI ML. How do we help develop the tradecraft with an underlying discipline to the standards so it doesn't become something that goes awry? Kevin?
You know, I think that it's important to test all of these applications in advance, because there's a certain amount of robustness that needs to be vetted in the field and touched by a lot of the subject matter experts before it can be kind of validated for use on you know, every project that we do. You know, and I also think it's important that we understand how people are receiving the data and how we can maybe improve our delivery process, because I think, you know, all the data exists in the cloud. It should be available at any moment, to be agile, to change based on a topic shift or a little lack of understanding in one area or another. We should be able to pull down more data. This is what we think about oftentimes when we're doing work with you know, some very innovative creators, where you never can really predict where they're going, but you always do a lot more homework in advance, thinking like, I might want to pull this out or pull that out, just in case it might go there. So, you know, I think also a lot about how, you know, the actual data that you guys generate and how that is communicated, like how could that be even more intensely visualized by AI of the future? Like, how can you take a mission scenario and have like a, you know, an animation be created that makes it, that is a fake animation, but it really drives it home. This is what we're looking at here. This is what could happen, and we see it like a movie playing out.
Right. Kevin, how do we prevent it from becoming that black box?
Yeah. So the first thing is that every time I go to you know, a normal audience, this audience is much more technical, but sometimes you get sort of less technical audiences. When you say AI, the first thing they think of is Ex Machina and her and Hollywood's vision of, you know, us interfacing with robots or something like that. That is a long, that's not what we're talking about in this room, right? And unfortunately, some elected officials might not be as technically competent, let's say, to really understand that. So you say AI to them and they go, oh, I don't want this robot making any decisions. And that's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about machine learning, which is basically math, that a machine can learn on prior data and make judgments about new data based on what it learned in the past. And it's just math. All it's doing is confidence scoring against what it learned, against a set of algorithms, and trying to make a pretty good match and trying to look for something and flag that to you. That's all that's going on. It's not that scary, right? It's not Ex Machina. So it's not going to take over your life. So the first thing is to let people know that this is just math. It's a new version of math. It's math that can run extremely well in a large cloud, but it's just math. It's better math than we had. In the past, very few people could run that math because we didn't all have a Cray, but now we kind of do because there's a cloud and I can ramp up 1,000 servers for an hour and get the data I want without having to pay for every minute on those servers. So that's the exciting part of this. And in terms of the black box, it is not true that all ML is a black box. A lot of ML can absolutely disclose how essentially it found things. But deep neural nets to date are generally a black box. And part of the reason is they can be very deep, right? They can be thousands and thousands of layers deep. And even if they could explain how they made a decision through that neural net, we couldn't possibly understand it, because they're making millions of little decisions just like we do. You know, I'll look at you and say, oh, he's got glasses on. I think they're from this brand, or I think this, whatever, right? Making a million decisions on that, who knows what neural pathway we followed. And so even if it could explain it, it would be probably not valuable to us. But I just wouldn't be scared of it. In the end, it's just a decision tree, it's just a decision process, and it's just math. And when we tell people that, it relaxes them a little bit, rather than it's Ex Machina.
As I think about it, you know, and going back to this idea of how do we accelerate where we are as a community, given that we have a community cloud, and given the kind of investments that have been made by the D&I across the community, we have the opportunity with AI/ML to have learning at a level across agencies that we have not had before. And out of that, again, out of sharing what people are doing and really having, developing the discipline that, to the point about testing it out early, that process of going through and doing the rigor to say what result it would really get, instead of jumping to the eureka moment of, look, we have a tool that can find something we didn't find before, and while that may be valid, we have to develop and get back to discipline of saying, okay, where did we do the diligence to understand that this result is valid? And with the relatively few number of folks that we have that are in this expertise level, the true experts, I think it requires a level of data sharing, and it requires a level of integrated learning across the community that probably was not possible a few years ago, but has been enabled now. And maybe there's only a few policies or regulations that haven't caught up, but really, really need to. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, please, to our panelists for an engaging conversation. And again, I'd like to end this the very same way I started, with the most important thing you can remember from this 45-minute session, which is that you are appreciated. And thank you, everyone in this room, no matter what role you have, for what you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.